Please welcome Alistair Rennie, General Manager, IBM Collaboration Solutions, SWG.
Everybody, this is Alistair Rennie. Alistair is the General Manager at IBM looking at the future of work and collaboration and where that's headed. And so actually, let's take up a point from where Chris was talking about the transplants, these brain transplants at IBM. That started with Lou Gerstner. What was that like?
So it's, first of all, you can never stop reinventing. We went through we talk about social, we went through a process over a couple of generations of leaders. One was to sort of go back to the values the company always had, sort of around innovation and trust and respect. And then we went through a transition with Sam Palmisano on really refining those and modernizing them. Interestingly, we did that by connecting 400,000 IBMers globally to have the team kind of come through to those. And then we just went through another jam, about 10 times the size to bring them forward. And one of the things that came out of that is this idea of restless reinvention. And for us, it's been a journey to say, the goal has never been technology for its own sake. It's been technology in the context of what our clients are trying to do for their own business. Right. What our clients are trying to do has changed a lot. If you think about the arc of IBM over 100 years, 101 years, it started with business machines at the time, tabulation, weight, measure, all those sorts of things, critical. They help people do what they're doing. It moved through sort of, back office automation, which went on for 40, 50, 60 years. And that was where people found all sorts of efficiency and gains. And it's really clear right now we're in the era of, we talk about, smarter planet, smarter business. We're in the era now of people trying to innovate what they do, the front office of their business. We're seeing people moving from, optimization to innovation, moving from, trying to count things to try to predict things, to moving into the era of cognitive. So if you sort of keep the idea of what you're trying to do at the front, then reinvention, becomes possible. If you get stuck on, what you do and define yourself in technology, you're dead.
No, that's a great point. And actually, I wanted to talk about this. You joined IBM in '89.
I did.
And
I was a child.
You were a child? Okay. You joined IBM in '89, and a lot of things at IBM and Lotus really started out the design thinking. I mean, before design thinking was cool. And when we go back and we look at technology, we see trends come back and forth. Like many of you guys have heard me say that, cloud computing is really mainframe time sharing reinvented 40 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's come back, right? It's hot.
Yep.
So, and if you take something like, engineered systems, those are really AS400 boxes all over again, like as another way to look at this. But going back and thinking about that experience through being at IBM through those different periods of time, I mean, are there certain things that, that you guys had come up with 20 years ago? And it's coming back into fashion, or hasn't come back into fashion, but well. When you go back into the toolkit of the IBM labs.
So I think design in the context of business is a really important one, and we're going through, our own kind of renaissance of design thinking. The AS400 is a great example, right? It was, people talk about, running their business and not realizing where it was running.
Yeah.
You hear stories about people finding one of these things running in a closet 5 years later, and it's still working, and they have no idea what it's,
We had a client like that. They did a remodel, and really what happened was they didn't know where the box was. Right. They had to punch through and find it.
So you fast forward that now to what people are trying to do with cloud, right? They just want, infinite variable capacity and never worry about it and focus on their business. I think in the collaboration space, so much of what we learned early that continues to be valuable and really important is, it's not about collaboration as a set of tools, it's about collaboration as a platform for business context. So, how do you start to integrate the work you do, the process you do into the way you work? And that platform, does that, I think, better than anything else. As we started moving into, the social tools, I think like everybody, we kind of started with, okay, there's some new formats, there's some new tools every week, my wiki, your wiki, blog, whatever, just from a tool perspective. But it became really apparent quickly that these are, okay, yeah, they're technology, it's software, it's delivered that way. But people were using them to rethink how they did work. And if you sort of take the idea that many clients are moving from, efficiency to innovation, the only way to get there is to figure out how to leverage the people inside or outside of their organization and scale that out. and social really has become a platform for that. So the business context has never gone away, and I think we're coming right back to that. We go through these frenzied periods of neat new technology, but it's ultimately about what can I change in my business.
But going back, let's say, going back into the old IBM labs, are there certain things that you think are going to come back that aren't fashionable now, but you think there are certain things that people had already discovered and came back and said, hey, this is going to transform how we work?
I think the interesting thing about what we're doing right now is what's coming forward. The work we're doing, for example, with Watson on cognitive is unbelievable.
So the robots are actually going to take over?
So the robots aren't going to take over.
Okay.
The robots are going to help the humanoids.
Chris has me all worried.
So I don't think they take over at all. I mean, I'll give you an example of what we're doing with Watson. So Watson did a nice job winning a game show and proved out a bunch of things. But I'm spending more time with doctors. And if you sit with a physician in a couple of different scenarios, the fundamental thing that tends to change patient outcome is what happens in that first interaction with the physician. I think your wife's a doctor, right?
My wife's a physician.
So, in the world we live in, the amount of information that those doctors can stay fresh on is tiny.
Yeah.
So, having better search doesn't help them. So it really becomes a world of, how do you end up in interactive dialogue with a system that can learn, can be patterned, and can help you make a better decision faster. So Watson's, doing that with cognitive. I mean, we're using that now in the context of customer service. I don't need an FAQ on a website or, a quick chat. What I really need to have is an interactive dialogue around how do I get to a better customer service experience, a better product recommendation. And you need a system that's not so much constrained by, programming rules, but, learns by interaction. So I think this era of cognitive is probably, the most exciting thing going on right now.
Well, actually related to that, last time we talked about social tied back to process and the need for better instrumentation.
Yep.
Is that happening? Are we even close, or is that just something that's still out in the near term?
I think the dialogue's getting better. I mean, usually the instrumentation...
Give the audience some examples of the instrumentation types.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the sort of not helpful discussion around instrumentation is, measure the health of my social network. Sort of how active is it, where it is. Those are useful because they help sort of people deal with cultural transition, all that kind of stuff. But, the point of most businesses is not to have an active social network, inside or outside. The point is to do something. So where I'm seeing huge progress is, really purposeful business-led discussions about what social business can do. I'll give you a couple of examples. My favorite is Cemex.
Oh, yeah.
Cemex
is the Mexican conglomerate.
They make, amongst other things, cement.
Oh.
So, the way they kind of presented the problem they came to us with was, we're global, we're growing, we're shifting from regular to lightweight cement, which is harder to make, throws off more greenhouse gas, but more profitable. And our goal is to cut our cycle time from plant to production by 60%. Therefore, we're going to wire the firm together with a social network to connect expertise globally. It's not possible to fly people around. So, their measurement, their instrumentation was, can they actually cut cycle time on product delivery by leveraging people better? And they were able to. It's been well discussed. I'll give you another medical one. Children's Hospital in Boston. The problem, and we worked with a physician there, a guy named Jeff Burns, who runs pediatric emergency care, great guy. Frustrated as a teaching doctor that the limitation of his way to share knowledge globally was how many high-def video conferences he could get on. Not a technology boundary, but a time-space boundary. Worked with them on something that got launched as, it's called Open Pediatrics. So you could think of it as Facebook plus YouTube, but for doctors. And the hospital's taken tons of amazing content, put it into this private, secure social network, surrounded that content with learning pathways, surrounded it with expert networks of doctors to allow physicians to both see demonstrations, and discuss, in real time, how to do these things. So their measurement is increased, physician capability.
Right, or transfer of knowledge.
Transfer of knowledge, and this thing's gone viral. So
and do they get CME credits in the back end, or is it?
Well, so that's what they're starting to do, to sort of say, okay, if I'm in this system now, I may need to see something right away because I got to do a procedure. And you'd be amazed how much that goes on in this world. I mean, procedures change. But yeah, I mean, it becomes a platform for people to stay current, to stay regulated. You can see all sorts of other things happening with it.
And are they sharing that out with like non-academic medical centers, pushing it out to like other reaches for outreach programs?
So what they're really focused on right now is pediatric care centers.
Okay.
So it's in about 60, 70 hospitals, 1,500 doctors, and we've got a bit of a tiger by the tail with it now. So we're trying to figure out how do we scale next.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, shifting a little bit to more around boardroom issues and what's happening in the boardroom for not just social business, future of work, collaboration, putting out on that strings. I mean, what are some of the big shifts? I mean, I think IBM just recently did that CXO study, and inside there's some very interesting insights. And for some of you guys, I think IBM might be putting a lot of us analysts out of business. They have this very in-depth study where they interview people, for about 4,000 people, face-to-face interviews asking about trends in the boardroom. And so what are some of the things that are changing and shaping that future of work?
We're not going to put you out of business.
You're not going to put it out of business? All right.
So we do this every couple of years, and it's a big engagement, as you say. This year was really interesting. So when you sort of back away from a lot of the detail, big trend that came out was in almost every industry, how do you become a more customer-activated enterprise is the term we're using. And that kind of manifested itself in a couple of different ways. So if you go sort of aggregate what we're hearing from CEOs about the 3-4 things that are keeping them awake about how to compete, it's coming down to, interestingly, technology. Not, and that may sound obvious to this team, but this group, but not technology as a, I need one, but technology in terms of how do I either apply it to disrupt, or how do I understand how people are trying to disrupt me with technology and platforms.
So as an enabler, so as a force to create disruption.
More than an enabler, I mean a platform for fundamental change, different forms of client engagement. So technology is a huge issue. Opening up the firm to much more active engagement with client innovation, client interaction. Big deal. So this openness of the firm and how to become more open. You saw a little bit of that in Chris's thing with P&G, but that is becoming a mainstream threat. And then people. Coming up on the CEO agenda is, you call it lots of different things, talent management skills, but when you're past the world of efficiency and into the world of innovation and disruption, how you structure your workforce is a big deal.
So is the shift, I mean, are they investing? Or does the survey come back and say, yeah, here's what's happening, I mean, but are they making the shift with a budget behind that?
Sure. I mean, they're making shifts in a lot of different areas, and it'd probably resonate with the crowd here. I mean, it's shifts in how do I rethink customer care in a big way. So maybe people are working at good segmentation, but the model is how do I move from segmentation to treating as an individual. And a lot of investment in that. Lots of different ways people are doing that. How do I replumb the collaboration network of the organization to be, right now it's mostly either internal or some degree external, and a lot of investment in how do you sort of create that porous boundary, that managed porous layer as an investment. And we're seeing huge investments in how people think about talent in their organization in entirely new ways.
Well, that internal-external conversation is actually really interesting as well. Are you seeing a breakdown of people actually separating, this is an external world, internal world? Do you see more of that collaboration trying to bring that together?
We spent last week with sort of 6 or 7 of our biggest clients, and the number one thing that people are trying to figure out is how to create this secure internal-external boundary. So I don't know that the pattern's fully established. We're seeing it in one front where client is actually taking email out of their customer care website and moving purely to social and putting that back into workflow. So really starting to think more deeply about integrating what have been point tools, whether it's sentiment analysis or CRM system or social response systems, but they're trying to think about that as a more complete system. So we're going to see that. In clients that have either direct customer relationships or through an agent kind of structure, lots of those. All the investment right now is going to start moving into how do you allow people in those organizations to work more effectively with their clients, but from a single context. And it's an easy enough thing to think through conceptually. Where the real work is always they need to do it in a way that meets regulatory. That allows for the right kind of security and privacy and customer data and all that kind of stuff. But people are making a lot of move down that front.
So you've seen the cycle of best of breed going from best of breed back to suites, back to best of breed. Where are we in that cycle?
I think we're and the balance of those things always ends up being integration and standards. So I think we're at the point now where in the social space it's going to be about meaningful integration and standards. If you take sort of customer-facing social, the world of siloed tools on content publishing to networks, a little bit of social media analytics here, a little bit of whatever there. that's clearly not viable. Those experiments have proven to be good, but people are trying to get to integrated workflow around the customer, tie it back into other things. So I think it'll never be one or the other. We are seeing clients say, how do we have meaningful interaction amongst these things? So stream integration.
Is it just people as well, but is it also machines? Because we're heading in that direction in some places.
Sure. I mean, it's always been machines, but I think it's it's meaningful interaction. People do not want vendors to be arguing over my stream versus your stream, my network versus your network. What we don't want to do is end up in the world of chat and instant messaging where they ended up being tiny networks. We want to end up in the world of open integration standards.
Okay, so we've been talking about moving beyond, where social, mobile, cloud, big data, and video are going. And we see that as really the 5 pillars of digital business. When you take that and project forward, where do you see that happening for clients? Like, where are they going to push forward next?
So I think my view is those are interesting tools, right? They are not an integrated thing, right? You don't go buy a SMAC, or whatever acronym you want to do. They're tools. So I think trend 1 is it's allowing people to have a much more rapid, simplified view of how do they actually want to deconstruct and change a business process. So instead of having to deal with everything on the back end and 10 years of ERP implementations to get anything done, these tools allow you to go through rapid cycles of innovation for a point project. And I think mobile, for example, has given us all permission in the enterprise to try, fail, try again, iterate, try, fail again, because you're on a 3-week release cycle, not a 10-year ERP cycle. So that's one. I think it's speed and business decomposition. I think it's also going to get to really, really meaningful domain application. I mean, as they're like nice technology buzzwords. Pick talent and work. So we put together kind of our point of view on talent, which says 4 things disrupt it, not surprisingly. Social, use of analytics, mobility, and the rise of the independent worker, sort of this whole restructuring of the firm. So you don't care about mobile because it's there. You care about mobile, for example. Look at organizations. Pick a retail organization, maybe got 100,000 employees, of which 80,000 have no digital connection with the organization. They're part-time, whatever. And then you say, our goal is to increase sales. All of a sudden, you now have a in-the-pocket way to enable, to engage with that employee that you never had before. So you start to rethink enablement, performance management, culture in a way you just couldn't, and you don't have to wait 10 years to do it. No. You can try it tomorrow, and then again and again and again.
Well, that comes back to some of these things we're seeing in the future of work, right? We're moving to a free agent nation, co-working spaces are the norm. Sure. People are working on contractual project basis. I mean, how's that changing in your perspective?
So if you think about it I think the marketing world is a great example of what's going to happen in human resources. So, we've seen CMOs move from, being driven by creativity, the Mad Men days, then we kind of got a little bit better and we started dealing with segmentation. And now you go talk to leading CMOs and they're data scientists. They're looking at how to deal with customers as a unit of one. Yep. I think the exact same thing is going to happen with talent management, human resources. If you think about employees less as classes and more about groups and start to think about them as unit of ones, yes. Then, well, how do you recruit? Well, you've got to put customized offers in front of the best people, and you've got to move them through a cycle. How do you do assessment? Well, you start to use science. You start to use a science to figure out both individual and cultural fit. How do you do performance management? Well, you start to look at individual performance plus team performance, but underlined by analytics. When you start to think about the very restructuring of the firm, where you want to have the best people at the right time for the right projects, I would argue a little bit that what Chris talked about is some of the friction coming out of the corporate model still hasn't come out of the talent model. So if you really want this ability to have free-flowing talent, what do you need? Well, you need some kind of a way to measure reputation. Most performance management systems inside enterprises don't do it. No. We've seen some really bad examples of endorsed skills. I mean, I've been endorsed for some things I don't know how to do. I hope to someday, but I mean, we've all seen sort of that stuff. So I think there's going to have to be an open standards-based mechanism to say, what do you really know? Compute the value of your network, whether you're an engineer or a salesperson.
Well, we talked about that before, thinking about, imagine if you flattened out. You hired people and you gave them sales territories based on their strength of relationship and their reputation.
I mean, it's not inconceivable to say I could run some degree of analytics against your network and say, for what I'm trying to do for the next year, you have the best client relationships. Now, and then you got to work through, okay, okay, well, we don't want short relationships with clients. We want people that have long-term relationships.
Right.
Or if you're going to generate IP, we need a model for that. So I think a lot of what's going to happen in talent is how do we take the friction out of the system so that we can get to this free flow of talent that everyone wants.
And transparency too.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's, you talk to both employers and employees, that's what they want.
So to have that right balance.
So, when we talk about social and analytics, those are tools to help make those things possible.
So how do clients start? Where do people begin? I mean, there's so much. I mean, you look at all these different places as starting points. I mean, a lot of people don't even know what entry points to start with.
Well, I mean, the first thing is it's got to start with a business problem, right? The very best examples of this are, the Cemex of the world saying, we got to cut cycle time. Or Toronto Dominion Bank or TD Bank in the States saying, we need to really reinforce a differentiated culture. Or a Jeff Burns at Children's Hospital saying, we got to change the way we enable doctors. On and on and on. So it's really got to start with that business purpose in the context of what changes the world for you. I mean, for us, we're going through a very big push right now. We're a huge user of social, obviously. But we know that one of the best things we can do is put the right person on the project the first time, which gets into expertise location. So that's what we're using the information out of our social network for, so we can serve clients better. That's where to start. It needs to start with that, and it needs to start with an outcome-driven approach. Everything else tends to work from there.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, now I'm going to shift into something that's actually a different set of trends.
Okay.
Part of the reason I'm asking this is because there's a perception of IBM being big. Mm-hmm. Right, and so you only do big projects, and things are really expensive. I mean, is that true? Where are the entry points?
So we do projects of all different kinds of sizes. I mean, we've got a huge SaaS business that allows us to do very quick projects with clients of all different sizes. And big can mean smaller company. It can also mean group within a big company. So I think we do all sorts of work with clients and groups within clients of many different sizes, and we can do it pretty effectively. We've expanded what we do with cloud services now, with SoftLayer being part of IBM, and I'd be willing to bet that half the apps running on your iPhone are running on SoftLayer,
yeah.
part of our cloud service now. So that many small companies. So we do both small and large. And lots of different. I mean, this is the friction coming out, right? The nice thing about cloud is you can do things. Cloud's great, but you can do things faster.
Okay. So, two questions. Last,
okay.
So signature questions on the back end. But for now, if you weren't in this business, right? If you weren't actually in software, what other technologies are interesting? Where do you see in the future? Some people have talked about music earlier. Some people have talked about sports. Some people talked about other pursuits that they'd be in. What other things would you want to do? What's one of your passions?
So, like every middle-aged man in America right now, I like cycling. And
any cycling fans? Raise your hands. I'm curious. Oh wow.
What I'm finding is some amazing examples of, and beyond that, but some amazing examples of using, pick some of these the buzzwords are being used, but using to really help people enhance.
So what are you wearing? You got devices?
Well, when I go for a ride, it's a heart rate monitor, power monitor, cadence monitor, and all that kind of stuff. But all neat. But the real point is, it gets to the thing I like about cycling is it gets to both individual performance, but also team performance, which I think is a great metaphor for business. So I think there's some really cool stuff going on there.
Okay. So do you tie back any, I mean, when you look at, do you tie back any other technologies to that? Do you think about how that brings back, is there a self-quantification element to it?
Well, it's a huge, I mean, it's the technology's cool, absolutely. I mean, you can measure everything.
Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Absolutely, but not for the joy of, for that, but for the joy of, motivation. So if you think about, so you think about employees in the context of business. I mean, we don't do performance management that way. We tell people they're an A, B, or a C. But every day, every minute, you get this micro feedback, which drives performance. It ties typically to social networks. So you've got both the lift from your team, and you've got sort of the factor of I don't want to let the team down, and you got it in real time. You've got constant improvement. You've got goal setting. I mean, so I think there's a lot of things there that are a very powerful example for what could be done for business performance management.
All right, last question before questions. What's your favorite sci-fi gadget or technology gadget that you'd love to have?
Well, you said I can't.
I can't go to transporters.
So yeah, I can't have.
Can't go to transporters. Nothing on Star Trek.
So I'll go with the. It's either the DeLorean.
The DeLorean.
I take the DeLorean or the sonic screwdriver.
Sonic screwdriver. Anyone? What's a sonic screwdriver?
Which has been relentlessly reinvested. So that's from Doctor Who.
Yep.
It's gone through many shifts. It's been written in, been written out. But it's
what does a sonic screwdriver do?
Kind of whatever you want. Can open any lock except wood. I think open any lock. Kind of whatever it needs to do for the plot. But it's a universal device.
Well, hey, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank
Pleasure.
you very much, Alistair.
All right.
Please give him a round of applause. If we can turn up the lights, we're going to do some Q&A. All right, maybe we can see people if we light it up a little more. Let's see. All right, I think we got a question up there. Name, rank, no, just kidding. Just give your name and where you work.
Tim Jones of Buzzing It. Quick question about kind of supporting the hybrid environment. So it's pretty well known that IBM just completed a pretty substantial internal transformation, moving away from Oracle Siebel to Sugar. But at the same time, the global services business is doing Siebel consulting and actually actively doing work in that area. Can you talk a little bit about that hybridization, both inside IBM, but also working with hybrid customers?
Sure. We're a big company, and I think you get to be pretty mature about serving your clients. So, we certainly do consulting work with SAP and Oracle, and that's a great relationship for us and for them and for the clients that are using that technology. At the same time, we also have a perspective on where the innovation is coming in smarter commerce, across the analytics, across human capital management, social, et cetera, et cetera. So, we innovate on our own platforms there. We work with our own consulting teams there and with an ecosystem of people around them. So I think it's not so much a challenge as it's just, sort of business maturity. We can help our clients starting with what they've got and help them, find value. We also have a pretty powerful arsenal of our own capability that's differentiated. If you keep going back to, I think, two things. No client I have ever met has a perfectly homogeneous stack of technology, nor will they ever. So the real world is taking what people have, looking at integration, moving them forward, and less about sort of technology religion. So I think we have a pretty mature viewpoint about how you deal with the real world, which is always more mixed up and messy than anybody would like it to be.
Great. Any other questions? Let's see. Up here with Alex. Let's see.
Alex Williams at TechCrunch. I'm just curious about what you thought about the prior discussion on stage today, with the keynote about really the future of capitalism and how that's affecting very large organizations, especially, I think IBM fits right into that.
Yeah.
Automation is becoming such a big part of the way business is being done. But it seems like a lot of large technology companies are extremely inefficient, especially with their sales forces, as compared to, I'm curious what you're trying to do to make your sales force much more efficient, maybe by trying to automate it more online and doing that to try to drive customers to transactions more than sending, people on the sales force who take very large commissions.
Yep. So I thought it was a great presentation from Chris. I thought there were some really interesting aspects of it. To your more specific question, it relates a little bit to what somebody asked. We actually decided to make a pretty substantial investment in some of our sales enablement tools, and we chose some of the technologies that were mentioned, but we didn't want to do it in a traditional way. We wanted to do it largely from what you were talking about. So we wanted to, build a true kind of system of the future that focused on helping our people be more effective serving our clients. So, the audience for this was not sort of management. The audience was the person doing the work. And one of the reasons we went the way we did was so that we could integrate it with our internal social network. Again, not for fun, but because we can use the information out of the network to help people find the right expert, to find the right content, We're using tagging to be able to have a much faster understanding of what's going on, and we can take away a lot of more traditional sales processes and just have the system give us truth and analytics. So it's a terrific example of that. We're doing all sorts of things around high value. For a lot of what we do, it's high value. So we've got a lot of different ways of going in and helping clients with business problems versus trying to sell them something. Again, that goes back to expertise, which is why we've got such an expertise investment. And then I think we're also like everyone else on this journey towards self-service. I mean, if you look at what we do across our cloud businesses, tremendous amount of that is self-service, where the product is its own site, right? You don't have a pitch about cloud. You just use cloud. So I think we're doing a lot of things across a lot of different dimensions. It ties back to how do we more effectively tie expertise to clients?
Actually, interesting shift. We are seeing that for people are moving from products that you sell to products that people buy.
People experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about the
People experience it.
So, thank you very much. So, let's go.
Thanks, Ray.